Hi. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the discussion today on the subject of what makes inspiring spaces. My name's David Judge, and I'm joined by Kevin and Gareth, who will shortly introduce themselves. Today we are going to discuss and chat and share insights and thinking around the idea of what makes inspiring spaces. Why are inspiring spaces important? How do you create them? And what are the components of inspiring spaces? Without further ado, we have three presentations, and then we'll have a bit of a conversation after them. I'm going to ask my partners, Gareth and Kevin, to introduce themselves. I'll give a brief introduction of myself, and then Gareth is going to kick off with his presentation first. So, Kevin, sorry, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, everybody. Yeah, my name is Kevin Cooper. I'm a director of Noor Architects in Glasgow. And I've been working on school buildings for about 20 years now. So hopefully I've learned something over that time. So I'm looking forward to hopefully sharing a few inspiring spaces with you today.
Thanks, Kevin. And Gareth?
Hello, yes, I'm Gareth Long. I've been helping design school buildings for, 15 years, I guess, but I've been in education all my life, being a teacher, head teacher, etc. So I really look at how the school's designed from an operational and how it works educationally.
And I'm David Judge. I'm relatively new to the education sector. I've been involved in the design of environments for 25, 30 years now, but I'm actually from the commercial sector. I've spent 20 odd years designing retail and experience design for the likes of Adidas and the All Blacks and Virgin and all sorts of people. And I started work with Space Zero 2.5 years ago now, and looking at how and what the lessons and strategies from the world of commercial experience design could bring for the world of education environments. So, yes, the other two have done a lot of real stuff helping children's lives, and I'm here kind of talking about strategy and theory, really. So, Gareth, over to you.
Okay, thank you very much, David. And I'm going to kick off with, I suppose, talking about spaces that aren't used so much in schools. Now, I'm hoping you can see my screen. Can you see my screen?
Not yet.
Not yet. Can you see my screen now?
No, I can't see it.
That's interesting. Can you see my screen now? If I do that. Nope. Can you see my screen now?
No, we're still seeing you.
Oh, that's very unfortunate. Okay, I'm going to have to try and work this out. I'm doing everything right, I think. Chrome
Would it be helpful, Gareth? Do you want me to show mine in the first instance?
You show yours, and I'll try and work out why I can't see it. I don't know why I can't see your screen. Okay, sorry. You carry on, Kevin, and I'll try and work this out.
Okay. Well, hopefully everyone can see mine. Can you see that, David? Yeah?
Yes.
So, okay. I'm going to do a little bit of chat for about 15, 16 minutes. So great. Thanks very much for asking me along. Given the short time that we've got, what I thought I would do is really just talk about two projects. West Calder High School in West Lothian and Bertha Park High School up in Perth. There's sort of two projects, but they've basically got one aspiration, which is to create joy. To be honest, I think what is an inspiring space for me? An inspiring space is something that that creates joy in very sort of simple terms. And I think as an architect, if you do that, then you've really succeeded as far as I'm concerned. Because ultimately, what we want to do is create happy learners. That is the essence of designing school buildings, and that's certainly why I get out of bed in the morning, and my colleagues as well. It's a very rewarding building type to design. But how do you do that? How do you actually go about creating inspiring learning spaces? Well, to me, it's not about adopting some kind of cookie cutter pattern that someone else imposes on you. Corridors of this width and rooms of that size. You have to approach it with an open mind and actually speak to people and understand what it is they want to achieve. And in my experience, all the best projects come about from doing that, from actually speaking to people, and more importantly, listening to people to try and understand what it is they want from their project. I mean, it sounds pretty obvious, but to me, a building is not a car. It's not something that's repetitive. Every project is unique, and I think if you approach the design process adopting these things here, come at it without any preconceived idea and engage meaningfully with people, then I think you'll get a good result. And something which my colleagues and I feel very passionately about is every project is indeed unique. Every site's unique, and I think if you adopt that open-minded engagement process, then ultimately you will get a project that's appropriate to that particular site and that particular place and those particular people. In order to do that, I mean, the brief is absolutely key. I would say, especially over the past few years, that's the thing I've learned. If it wasn't obvious immediately to me at first, it certainly is now, that the brief is absolutely the key to achieving the best solution. So we do spend a lot of time on that. Sometimes we do it ourselves. Sometimes we'll work with people like Space Refugees, and we spend 3-4 months thinking about the brief and thinking about the relationships before we actually even design anything. And I think that to me is absolutely essential. David, there's a lot of background noise from you. I don't know if you want to mute your microphone. So these are the last 3 projects we've done: William McIlvanney Campus in Kilmarnock, West Calder High School, and Bertha Park. And I'm going to spend just 5-6 minutes talking about the latter 2 buildings there. West Calder High School was finished in 2018, and a really interesting project for a fantastic client. Very, very rewarding building to be involved in. Here is our slightly scary, but nevertheless very, very nice client who really had a vision to do something really good, and we did do consultation as normal in this project, but nevertheless, because there was an overriding desire to do something a bit more radical and a bit different, that really needed to be driven from the top, and Dr. Cook here really certainly did do that. Had a vision for how education should be delivered in West Lothian and in this building in particular, and we simply put clothes around that vision, if you like. So the long, detailed process led to this kind of basic disposition of the educational elements for the project, which we then developed. And I think it's worth mentioning that the building is extremely efficient. So I think one of the primary roles of an architect is to design the budget, design the building, and spend the budget wisely. And I think we did do that. So the building is less than the government guidance, but it still provides additional space that wasn't in the brief. And to me, that is true, palpable value. Every job is unique, as I said, but the context of this particular project was this kind of post-industrial landscape of West Lothian, into which we wanted to drop a 21st century digitally enabled fantastic learning environment. But nevertheless, I think it's still good to sort of reflect the particular context that you're working in. That led to a form which had an interesting roof profile that echoed the kind of landscape around it. Very compact building. We then developed that through consultation and good old physical models. I know it's a digital high-tech world and BIM is fantastic, but sometimes a physical model is a fantastic way for people to really understand that they can see that this building is going to have some inspirational spaces within it. A real sort of variety of space, and really putting a huge amount of real rich array different kinds of learning spaces into what is a very compact project, and one that incidentally had a 10-meter level difference across the site. So the north-facing elevation is glazed and civic, putting learning on show. The side elevations are a little bit more closed and compact, and so you get a grandeur and a civic scale at the front of the building, and a lower scale, a more sort of primary, scaled facility at the back where the kids flow in from the adjacent residential property. So again, the building is responding to its context, but having an interesting roofscape that echoes the landscape around it. When you enter the building, I think in any building it's great to walk in and hopefully feel at least some inspiration. The idea behind this was this 3-story kind of entrance canyon placed at an angle to the main geometry of the building, so it creates a rich array of interesting spaces. And that time when you're a kid and you walk into a football stadium for the first time and you go up the steps and then the grandeur of the stadium is revealed to you. That in essence was the idea behind that. We get to the top of the stair in the central auditorium, which is a multi-purpose flexible space, is the fulcrum of the building, the focal point of it, flooded with natural light, which again I think is an incredibly important component of inspiring space, whether it's a cathedral, an airport, a house, or a school. I think the quality of natural light is probably for me the single most important thing in making people feel good. I mean, that, in creating joy and making people want to be there. I think that really is vitally important. So is the connectivity between spaces. So when you've got a very compact plan, what that allows you to do is sort of create lots of visual interconnections between spaces. And if you can make that a bit richer with interesting colors and materials and so on, then that really helps. Lots of acoustic absorption from this timber material. But a real kind of a diversity of space within the building as well. The older school here was a kind of sprawling 1960s building, very typical of a lot of buildings of that time. It took 10 minutes to walk from one end to the other, whereas here the head teacher could almost see the entire building from one vantage point. So not only is that just more functionally efficient, it also really enhances that sense of school community. As much visual connectivity between, through, and across spaces as you can get, and great. And ultimately, what it's trying to do is to maximize opportunities. To create a real diversity of space that can be used in lots of different ways for lots of different activities. So, we're just the architect. We're not the educator or the learner. We're just providing a canvas for people to then occupy in a way that they think is appropriate and the way that makes them feel comfortable. So, the more diversity of space you can achieve, furniture, different heights and size and shape of furniture, writable surfaces, grand spaces, intimate spaces, all that stuff is important to collectively create a real sense of, valuing young people. I think the best, I mentioned this before, I think the best compliment we've ever had as architects is at the opening of the school that we did. The head teacher said, when I look around this new building, I can see that young people are valued by the society which created it. And fantastic. I don't think that's a very fulfilling thing to hear. That's exactly what we're trying to do. And the spaces, have worked very well. And I mean, don't tell anyone, but halfway through construction, I was wandering around site thinking, I hope this is definitely going to work. Because some of the spaces were radically quite different to what we'd done before. But I think what the building does do is it vindicates Dr. Cook's vision, and these collaborative learning spaces work incredibly well. Not only that a previously sort of conservative cohort of teachers arguably are now kind of, running on top of each other to be able to use these spaces. They'd rather use the collaborative spaces more than the cellular ones. But, there's a real blend of spaces. It's not all open plan in inverted commas. There's collaborative spaces and cellular spaces, and you do get unexpected benefits from designs like this, whereby staff, rather than retreating to their staff room or whatever, they'll actually sit in these kind of mini breakout spaces, and senior kids might be sitting opposite, and that again just helps with the camaraderie and breaking down barriers, and that school community thing gets enhanced. And when it comes to the learning spaces themselves, why spend money building 8 expensive science labs when you can have a variety of different kinds of science space. This is an example of a super lab where the theory space is adjacent to the practical space, and you just build a different variety of kinds of space to learn in. The larger scale spaces like the dining area here, social space, it's all enclosed within this kind of semi-industrial roof. We have the opportunity to provide further inspiration with our limited array of Scottish sporting stars. All that, kids love all that as well. You can see a window just on the left-hand side there that looks down into the games hall and the gym on the other side. So the 10-meter level that drop across the site allowed us to create all this kind of spatial interaction, which I think works well. And the big sort of learning plaza up here works well too. You can see a lot of the building from up there. And it's all contained within a very compact kind of semi-agricultural, contextually appropriate form. And, the vision, as I mentioned earlier, was really to be truly transformational, to have this terrific digitally enabled 21st century school, but have that sense of place. And I think the actual reality is delivering extremely well. I mean, and I must say it's very, very satisfying to hear that that I think everyone loves the school more than we could have hoped for, which is just fantastic. So the second building, just conscious of time, I shall stride on. The second project is Bertha Park High School in Perth. Now, this was designed shortly after West Calder. It's an interesting project because it's the first brand new school to be built in Scotland in 25 years. In other words, it's not replacing an existing building. So it was a bit of a blank canvas. So in fact, slightly unusually, there weren't any pupils to speak to. There weren't any staff to engage with. And so, so therefore the sort of radical approach at West Calder seemed a kind of logical starting point, as it were, given that there was a blank canvas, to then speak to Perth and Kinross Council. And unfortunately, they were similarly ambitious to do something really interesting. And that, therefore, some of the thoughts and ethos within West Calder kind of, evolved into Bertha Park, but in a slightly different way. And when you've got a limited budget like we had here, I mean, we had sort of just under £2,500 a square metre all in, which I know is perhaps a bit more than what it might be in England, but it's still a very tight budget when you bear in mind that the new Victoria and Albert Museum in Dundee is £20,000 a square metre. I mean, you've got almost a tenth of the budget to deal with, so you really, really have to spend that budget wisely. I think that starts with keeping the form very, very simple, which by happy coincidence is also, very thermally efficient, and it's intrinsically sustainable. And it does all that stuff that I've listed here. Really, it really helps to enhance that sense of school community again, because everyone is together in a really rich learning environment within quite a compact, simple building. So I guess we took the decision to let's spend our limited budget inside the building where the learning happens, where we can, have half a chance of creating, inspiring spaces, but keep the exterior of the building very simple. Use repetitive components, but still do it in an exciting, interesting way, and not in a cookie cutter, boring way with white render, and just actually do something that's appropriate to that particular project. And it is very efficient, and it's got an incredibly good form factor, and so it's got the form factor of a very good passive house building, even though it wasn't a passive house building at the time. But like West Calder, it puts learning on show at the front, and it's a similar orientation to the site, but it's in the middle of an expanding residential area of Perth. So completely different, more of a suburban context than the more semi-rural context of West Calder. So all that value starts in the first diagram, and these three doodle plans are literally the first sketches that we did. And I think, to me, the idea in a building design is the most important thing. Everything else is just detail. Incredibly expensive, incredibly time-consuming, and often incredibly difficult detail, but nevertheless just detail. The key thing to get right. The magic is in the idea, and that's what you need to get right. And if you can get something which will have an inspirational spaces within it, but at the same time allow it to be delivered for the budget, then even incredibly digitally enabled high-tech buildings like Bertha Park can still start with a simple felt pen diagram. Why not? It then develops into all the cool BIM stuff that I'm sure you're all familiar with now. And again, you can see just how incredibly compact that building is. I think we really tried to learn. I hope we're, as well as architects, we're lifelong learners, just like everyone involved in education, and trying to learn from what we've done before, and make it simpler but still make it good. So essentially, it's cellular spaces grouped around a series of large-scale spaces within. And as perhaps I should have mentioned earlier, that Bertha is one of only 17 schools in the world that have a relationship with Microsoft. So the Microsoft schools are incredibly digitally based, and in fact, with the whole COVID-19 thing, I thought it was quite interesting that they sort of segued pretty well into that, and actually all the digital-based learning from home stuff appears to have gone pretty well, actually. So, within this very simple wedge-shaped building, we've got some pretty cool spaces. So this is a sort of development of what you saw at West Calder. It's a real focal point. Any architects in the audience probably know the work of people like Hermann Hertzberger in the 70s in Holland. Very few ideas are completely new or revolutionary, and Hermann Hertzberger used to do sort of things like this, but we thought, well, let's take that idea and put it on steroids and actually connect all the levels of the building together so that you create a real genuine sense of grandeur, a real focal point, a real civic space. And when at the opening, when I was watching people kind of walk in this door, they looked up, and without exception, all smiled. And I thought, hopefully we've done our job well then, because there is that sense of joy as you enter the space. And it's also flooded with natural light. So a real strong focal point for the entire building. An assembly hall, a learning space, a corridor, a circulation area, all sorts of different things. Very flexible. I mean, I've been in there several times looking at kids sitting in giant beanbags with their iPads, doing individual learning or working together in groups. So they were doing a sort of geography project. So, that's what, flexibility is. It's not a big bland box with different kinds of furniture that you can put in it. It's actually designing bespoke spaces that hopefully are inspiring, but also allow lots of different activities to happen within them. But it can be grand when it's some kind of concert at the school, or it can have more intimate spaces. I think all good school buildings should have a real mixture of space, because again, what is inspiring space? Some kids feel very comfortable being in a big open grand space. Others probably prefer to sit and just chat to their friends or work in much smaller groups. So again, we need to just provide that flexibility that this is part of the social dining area, but it's also adjacent to music, and it can also be used for teaching or learning. So it's a multi-purpose space. This is the central area that all the flexible spaces are grouped around. Teaching spaces as well, lots of visual connectivity between them. Collaborative spaces, this was taken just as people moved in. Lots of different kinds of furniture, but much better once the kids actually occupy it. And you can see, collaborative learning actually, happening before your eyes.
Okay, great. Thank you very much for that. We need to move on to the next presentation now, if we can, if that's all right. Is there anything you want to finish off with?
No, apologies. Just right on. One final thing on digital learning, I think is worth mentioning, in that every individual department has got, a green room like this, so you can pragmatically and very simply, provide, lots of, full immersive learning experiences. So there we go. Apologies, sort of jumped it on a bit, but a copy of the presentation, I'm sure, will be available if anyone wants to get it. There we go. Yep. Okay.
Thank you very much, Kevin. And so, Gareth, how are you doing now with screen sharing? Do you think you're resolved? If not, I'll go next.
Goodness only knows, but I'm going to try again.
Okay. Good luck.
And
I do believe we've got some problems with the sound there, everybody, so apologies about that.
yeah, it's all right. I even watched the video on how to do this, but now what can you see now? Can you see my screen now?
Actually, Kevin, I think you need to stop sharing yours.
Oh, beg your pardon. Sorry, I'll do that.
That's it. Gareth, can you try now?
So I think that might work. Can you see my screen now?
No.
Let's see if that's working. I don't know why it's not working. Tyler, can you share, please? It's not working.
I think we've actually lost Gareth now. Okay.
Okay.
So I'll share and I'll do mine.
Yeah, you crack on, David. And you can...
Yeah. Okay. Can everybody see my desktop now? Can you see that, Kevin?
Yep, I can see that.
Okay. So hello, everyone. As I mentioned before, I've been working in the commercial sector for about 25 years, building things like flagship stores for Adidas and experiences for Virgin and All Blacks, Etisalat, Porsche, all sorts of people. And I suppose I just want to start this talk is really to explain what my title. I call myself an experienced designer. And what I mean by that is, the truth is experience does mean everything. And a lot of design disciplines are quite specific. They consider one aspect of a project. And with experience design, you really do need to consider everything. So when a person is in a space, it is the consideration of what they're looking at, absolutely. But what they're hearing, what they're smelling, what they're touching, how it works over time. Because you can be there for 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 3 days, 3 years. And that experience of time actually is what creates the impression that you take with you of something you visited. So my skill has been in developing what I call a brand environment. And that's opposed to a branded environment. So a branded environment is a typical corporate office where they have the logo on the door. It's the kind of Vodafone and everything, the red carpet and things like that, where it's very simply taken the corporate language and just stamped it to own it, like a petrol station. Whereas a brand environment is actually the ethos and the values of that brand actually brought to life. And in the background here, you can see a project which I've been working on for years now. Actually, it was due to open this year, which is an experience for the All Blacks on the waterfront in Auckland, but it's been delayed due to COVID. But what's appropriate here is actually the All Blacks is all about the idea of belonging as a brand, belonging to the tribe, literally. And that's what this thinking that I've been bringing into the education sector over the last couple of years it starts from and is all about. I've been trying to look at how the design of space and education and campus and the experience of learners, whether that's in primary, secondary, further or tertiary or higher, how they connect with the space that they're in. Because a lot of schools and colleges and universities, they are institutional by their very nature. But what I was drawn to in the research that we've done was actually this piece of research by Catherine Riley from UCL, who's a professor of urban education. And she's looking at this idea of a model that generates belonging. I mean, of course, belonging is actually a feeling, it's an emotion. It can't be designed specifically as such. But the idea of considering that once you walk into a space like a school or a classroom, the component parts of agency, as in your agency, how much control do I have over this space? the relationship with the people who bring this space to me, and how I know them and they know me, and they are encouraging my agency. And really, the idea that when this is all working well, this space becomes a place. If you think of the difference between, a doctor's waiting room and your home, when you get home, you have complete control of it, total agency. You know the relationship with the other people that you live with, and the space is a place. It's the same with a child's bedroom. In their bedroom, it feels even more like their space because they have more control, yet it's given to them, and that control is given to them by their parents. So this idea of place from space is a really interesting notion that lies at the heart of a lot of the work we've been looking at. And I'd like to share a case study that we've done recently for Wellington College. Wellington College, down near London in Berkshire, is actually, a beautiful Victorian building built to house the children of the officers that died in the Battle of Waterloo. And it's recently been expanding its educational offer around the world, but quite dramatically within China. And over the last 5 to 6 years, it has built 5 to 6 schools there, each one housing between 1,000 to 1,250 children. And they have built these buildings. The architecture is, the buildings are amazing. There's £60 million school. The architecture is something of maybe some would say a pastiche of an English school, but that's not really what we're concerned with. The Space Zero, we are about what goes on inside the space and how that works. And one thing that Wellington knew was that there was something wrong. The spaces weren't quite the experience that they were hoping to give. And if you think again of that word of experience, rather than just the design of an individual space, it's how the whole thing works all together. And the spaces were all built with quality materials. It's good faux bonan and lighting and, ceiling tiles and, the wall finishes and everything. There was nothing lacking in terms of spend, but possibly lacking in terms of imagination. And, there was the odd colour, when they needed a colour, they used blue because that's Wellington blue. And on the right-hand side in some of the later schools, they did what a lot of corporations do, is they pick furniture in the colour of the logo. But actually, that's a very dated approach. That's kind of, offices, kind of 1985, 1995. And even workplaces don't do that kind of corporate design anymore. So when you're in there, and I did speak to a lot of the children, etc., I asked them, what's your favourite place in the school? And the response came quite frequently, well, it all feels a bit the same, really. So, I suppose the library, because it's a bit cozier. And that's really what the owners wanted us to address. How do we give this some of the character that the kind of more brand environments that bring about their ethos and values, and how we could bring that into an educational establishment, possibly for the first time ever. And what was interesting, that this is the real Wellington, and that none of the architects previously had visited the actual Wellington. As in top left, you've got the beautiful Tree of Life, and bottom, in the middle there on the left, you've got the amazing kind of aubergine purpley doors. When you come in, they're like 10 foot high, and the fret cut lanterns from the chapel, and the Harry Potter-esque houses, badges in the refectory, and the Tree of Life values underneath it, and the Harkness rooms, even down to the Lavender Walk. It's absolutely exquisite experience as you move around the campus. And none of this had been transferred into Wellington, China. And I think this is a problem that a lot of international schools have when they go abroad. How do they bring their ethos to life? How can some of those values be brought into a contemporary building when you don't have all that heritage there? But that's what I do and have done for a long time for brands in malls and places like that. So the place to start really is actually with your values. And these are the Wellington values: responsibility, integrity, respect, kindness, and courage. And the first thing to do is expand those out and see what we actually mean by those, and what the designers and what strategy we can develop from this. So responsibility is about, it is about independence and influence. Integrity is about, strength and durability and wholeness. Respect about honor, consideration. Kindness is, also about warmth and goodwill and friendliness, and, courage about being brave and bold. But the three main ways that the actual organization operates its pedagogy and school experience around this is to provide it is an integrated experience. It has a heritage, and it wants that to come through, but it is now obviously integrated with its international presence. It has a holistic commitment to care of the children. So it's pastoral provision and a commitment to quality and a caring community. And it also has this kind of academic excellence, and it's about the future of education. So how do these three component parts, how are they expressed by an internal experience? So after actually a few weeks of working at this and workshops with them and understanding what they wanted to do with this contemporary modern organization in a completely different country, and where we got to is this, that the three main component parts should reflect themselves around. On the left hand side you have the heritage spaces, which are about dignity and quality, and they're proud of their past heritage, and this is the formal areas, the reception, the theatre, the parent cafe. And then in the middle you've got the holistic or pastoral areas where the children are. This is more human and gentle and caring, and it's the dining rooms, the library, the common rooms. And then you've got on the right hand side the progressive spaces, they're state-of-the-art facilities, the maker spaces, the gymnasiums, the swimming pools, these kind of things. And then we applied it to the site. So this was one of the first sites we worked on, which we built last year. This is the reception area as it was. And as you can see, they've done what a lot of people do when they build a new building, is they've taken very much the corporate colours, the corporate approach, the corporate language, and created something that feels like a kind of a walking logo, really. It's functionally correct, but actually aesthetically, it doesn't have anything of that Wellingtonianness. So how do you do that? So the first thing we do with all our projects is we, scan to BIM or model, strip them out so we have the wireframe of the exact space. And then we design our concepts to go in there. So you can see within this first concept design here, this CGI, that actually we've created quite a formal place, because formality does have its place, and a symmetry. And on the right-hand side, we've created modern abstractions of the references. So you've got the purple doors, but as panels, and you've got the lavender walk, and the oak is represented in the materials. And we've taken some of the patterns from all over the different Victorian embellishments and created patternation from them. But on the left, very much modern integrated digital screens, bringing to life all the different productions and communications that the school needs to have. And then we applied it. So this is the actual completed installation. And there's been fantastic responses from this. This was from Eleanor, who is the principal of Wellington College International, Shanghai. Parents generally think it's wonderful. It doesn't feel like a school. This is music to my ears. But what is interesting is this idea of environment as communication. She's saying, we now feel like an elegant and understated professional education provider. And that is what we're after creating, what we feel the experience should deliver. So then we apply that to the different spaces. So this is the staff room as it is existing, and then how it would be in the future. Thinking of, we often in the beginning of the workshops talked about it should feel like a great hotel. This is a very, it's a very expensive private school. And as we know, schools can also be as much a lifestyle for the parents as they are for the children. But what about the teachers as well? Don't we treat them with the same respect? The administration's office before, which felt like a very corporate space. Well, this is the first area that the children and the parents go into. So let's give it a grandeur. Let's give it a space where the child can sit in view of the parents while they do their entrance tests and exams. But it's a quality luxury almost environment. The uniform shop before, and then the uniform shop afterwards. And then the pastoral areas in the middle of the school where the children actually spend nearly all their time, because there are a lot of boarders here as well. So, the dining hall as it currently stands, like a lot of dining halls, is, flooded with practicality and chairs and those kind of things. But actually, the new area, based on this idea of pastoral care and creating areas and rhythm to the space where the children might go at different times of the seasons, depending on different children they're with. And indeed, what was interesting from the lady who is the chairperson for Wellington, she said, we could have meetings in there. That looks like a lovely place to go. The junior library beforehand, they love the book. They're unashamedly intellectual. So how can we make a library much more of a lyrical experience? So this idea of you walk in on the right-hand side through a forest, and then you have a glade in the middle where you can all sit down as a class, and then you can fly out the window at the other end as a happy ending. Maybe a little bit over lyrical or poetic, but you get the idea. The senior library, So that sense of progression as you move through the school. So putting the tree of life and that kind of quiet and peace and calm at the epicenter of the library. And the idea that actually the library isn't a storage place for books, it's a place for reading and adoring, actually reading and understanding the books themselves. The music room before and after, the small theatre before and after, and then we move into the progressive spaces. These are, as I say, the state-of-the-art facilities. So you have the swimming pool, which is a fantastic facility, absolute state-of-the-art with the touch pads and everything else. Before and then afterwards, an exciting, almost Nike-esque kind of environment. The gymnasium before and after, and you can feel that the connection between the spaces that you would naturally feel if you're a kind of sports-orientated person. These are your places, and that dynamism is coming through. And then the sixth form common room before and afterwards, shaped much around the idea of, rather than just a collection of furniture, almost like a place to hang out, like a WeWork or maybe kind of a child-friendly version of a bar or something like that. And then the boarding house beforehand, very functionally driven. And actually, when children are being dropped off at a boarding house, you want to feel excited about being there. So connecting to their world. Kids nowadays live in the world of Yo Sushi and Hollister. This is what where they live beforehand. So when they walk into an environment, what are they comparing it to in their heads? The boarding house common room before, very, again, functional, but afterwards, an exciting space that encourages the kids to sit around in groups and play games and watch films. And the biophilic elements in there to make you feel, and well-being and calmness being brought through. And then the literal boarding room itself. And rather than just being a room with furniture in that's good quality, actually really applying some of this imagination to it to give that child a sense of, wow, this is my space when they arrive. So that's the end of mine. So what we're trying to do, the idea of strategic experience design for education, whether that's schools or universities, it's interior design. It's not interior decoration. It's not about finishes and materials. It includes all the FF&E and functional requirements. It provides clarity and predictable future refurbishments, and it produces standardized specification, and it creates a unique campus experience which is differentiated from the competition. So yeah, that's me. I'm trying to keep it as quick as I can. But Gareth, how are you doing?
Hello. Well, I think we're going to share my slides centrally, I think. So
okay, let me stop sharing.
We will see if that works any better. So I'm just going to talk, and I hope slides are going to appear magically on the screen. So I'm
yes, we're there.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so I'm following on from Kevin and David. Actually, is been really interesting because we're absolutely saying the same thing. And I suppose next slide. What I'm saying is the circulation spaces behind it. Next slide, please. And it's really, I'm more interested in the circulation or the flow between spaces. We all know architects can do great external sites of building, and there's 3 projects here we've been involved with. We know they can do great outdoor spaces. Next slide, please. We know they can do great indoor spaces, learning spaces as well, when you get there with different styles and experiences. The bit I'm more interested in is the space between the two, and Kevin has shown some really good examples of what I'm talking about. Next slide, please. And this is certainly what, we've gone, yeah, okay, so I'm more interested in the space and how you get to the journey between the outdoor space and the learning space. Next slide, please. And this is what so many people have been used to in schools. These are all, I took all these photos, so these are schools in action. Luckily, both these schools have recently been demolished because they are such uninspiring spaces. We expect hundreds and hundreds of pupils to go through these nasty, poky little corridors. And if 25% of the area or more is about circulation, surely every space should be a learning space. And when we write a lot of briefs for architects and for schools, and we're always saying that every part of the school should be an opportunity to be a learning space in the school. So I went to some new schools recently. Next slide, please. And I'm not sure that they're any better, really, in lots of schools. I have to say this is in England specifically, because I know Scotland are doing great things, as are Wales, and are in schools around the place. The school on the right, little narrow white corridor, is a school for 420 students walking around. You see it's brand new. It's only been open about a year. And I just think that's a very, very depressing space. Next slide, please. And as we go through, even these very, very modern schools, the circulation space is really just, all you can do is move. You can't stop and talk to people. You can't have an opportunity for learning. You can't have informal interactions, really, when the whole school's moving. Next slide, please. Corridors are narrow, especially in the recent context, the very recent context. We have people saying corridors are just over 1 meter wide, and we're a large, lots of people crowding around. Next slide, please. Well, it's the whole body of opinion saying, learning should happen everywhere. It should be a really important space. It's about, as David just said, proud spaces where people feel they're respected, and it's not just a factory, really. So we're wasting big opportunities for people. And Kevin said, circulation, learning spaces, use of learning plazas, etc. Next slide, please. It's a project we did recently. It's near the front of the school, but it's a primary school. It's a small primary school, but they wanted every part of their school, including the front. It's inside the airlock. It can be an informal meeting place. It's a working space. Next slide, please. It has opportunities for small group work. This is not just a visitor place. It's a student workplace. It's a staff meeting place. And it's about a certain style and quality, really, I suppose. Where there are narrow corridors, do we use them to celebrate work? Next slide, please. Or are they simply just spaces to move? And good quality display is really good. This is a narrow corridor, but there are very good opportunities to display all the way through. It's dark, it's landlocked, there's no natural daylight. But if we next slide, please. I'm also interested about the end of circulation spaces. This is a fairly grotty corridor in a school. In fact, it's horrible. Next slide, please. But there are opportunities where you can have small informal spaces, even in the smallest school spaces. Next slide, please. Even in rooms where circulation is important, it's where work can be shared. It's a discussion point. It's a gallery space within a room. Skip 2 slides. Just go to 2 slides, please. So what we're trying to do in very small schools, this is just a 1 or 2 form primary school, is using those circulation spaces as best we can for informal learning. So these 2 rooms are connected. This works throughout every pair of rooms in the school, but the circulation space outside is a learning space which can be seen from the staff, and the whole area suddenly becomes a learning space for the whole school. Next slide, please. And we're trying to say this is another 2 form primary school, just using circulation so it's wide enough so you can learn in a variety of ways. They use these spaces for all sorts of ways. Furniture comes in and out, etc. And those spaces and the group spaces they're used by staff, they're used by parents in meeting with staff, they're used by students. It allows collaboration and independent learning. Next slide, please, is slightly reflective of what Kevin was saying in the sense of it's a primary school, not secondary, of opportunities of interaction, being able to sit and talk and work wherever. It's a gallery space, it's an assembly space, it's small group working space, it's sharing space. Next slide, please. In other schools, how do extensions build onto existing buildings? So there's interaction between people, and it's a sort of fairly high quality space that people can actually feel proud to be part of, really, I suppose. And there's a lot of circulation here, but there are opportunities for interaction and talking. Next slide, please. How we then celebrate students' work as part of the work through walking through the school. So this is a very wide piece of circulation. It's a street. It's used for lots and lots of ways, but celebration of learning and promoting what each department is doing is really critical to this whole nature of the school. Further down this same space, next space please, next slide please. Dining is absolutely central to the school. It can be seen by everyone, but it means these tables are used all day, every day by small groups, by staff, by visitors. They're used in lots and lots of ways. Passive supervision is fantastic everywhere in this school. There are no secret staircases. There's no hidden corners, etc. as we go through. And in the same school, there's 4 or 5 different places, next slide please, where people can just use the circulation to work in small groups collaboratively. It's right adjacent to offices, so there's passive supervision, so we don't have the ogre on the corner shouting at kids as they move around, because they know everywhere they go there's a likelihood that staff are there or can be seen. And it's changed the whole ethos of the school. The behaviour in the school has changed enormously since moving into this new building, and the corridors, I said at the start, being knocked down were the school they moved from into these spaces. So very, very different type feel of spaces. Next slide please. And it's not just working, it's informal talking as well. You can see the space I've just shown you further back in the slide. Next photo please. And it can look in all sorts of ways. This is slightly reflective of some of the spaces that Kevin was showing, where Kevin's were much bigger, but the whole use of spaces can be used in multi ways. Next slide please. Slightly older photos, the Academy some years ago now, but the whole concept about a whole space being a working space, a collaborative space, an opportunity to move inside with peace. This has got a really big plant ethos, which is even better really. Next slide please. And we've also done it in internal spaces. This is an office block that's moved, a school that's moved into a building that's built as an office block, but there were no corridors. We put no corridors in where we could possible in the old traditional sense. So circulation, you move through the spaces, you learn through the spaces, you chat through spaces, you eat in the spaces, and those sort of windows you see in the funny shaped buildings on the place on the left are all staff offices. So there's passive supervision everywhere you go. And it's working everywhere. Next slide please. Even projects we're doing currently internationally, they're looking at every aspect of spaces being learning spaces with almost no corridor at all. Next slide please. And it's just a rendering what it's going to look like, and that's being built as we speak. So the old ethos, next slide please, is really, I have no idea why we're building spaces like that in schools. It is totally lack of respect. It just is pure functionality, and we just need space, all spaces, doesn't matter what age range, to be professional educational space is a term I think David used in his session. Lots of people will say, schools work, we say, we don't want it to feel like a school. We want it to be a professional education environment. And that's really what I'm striving for, really. And I think Kevin, David and I are on exactly the same page on this. And about changing the quality of schools, really. And maybe the current situation now might influence the design of schools in the future. So actually, we stop having stuff like this in schools. That's it. Thank you.
Thanks very much for that, Gareth. That was really interesting. I mean, funny enough, we've got a few minutes now just to have a little bit of a chat maybe and try and encapsulate some of the main notions that tie the work together. So I suppose I'd just ask you both really, why do you think inspiring space is important?
You want to go first, Gareth, or shall I?
Okay, well, I think it's because it's actually about the feel, how you go in, isn't it? If you go and you're excited about the space you're in, or if you go in and think, I want to be here, I want to work here, it's fine. If you're just shuffling along sort of dark, pokey corridors into nice spaces, you're actually wasting 25% of the building. West Calder is a really good example of how there was almost no corridor there. There were a variety of spaces that you move through, you work through, you chat to, you eat in, and it's all multifunctional. And I think that really that's how work is happening. That's what workplaces are. There are lots and lots of interesting types of different spaces to work in. And why shouldn't schools be the same?
Absolutely. I think it's really fascinating. There is a revolution taking place in the workspace. Companies have finally realized that actually if you, that staff, their most probably expensive asset, if you treat them well and give them spaces that help them concentrate, focus, collaborate, etc., it improves innovation, it improves retention, all of these kind of things. And if you look at the adult world, the places we want to go, where we go to restaurants and hotels and places like that, the places that really inspire us, we want to be there. We are spoilt rotten, we are looked after, we are served, and we know that the company that provides that to us wants us to have a great time, so that we can be our very best. And yet with children, we still seem at times to still be in a world that says all you need is functionally this, and then the rest of it is stuff that we need to be able to wipe down and clean easily. And I feel it's like when you are looked after, going back to that model of belonging, you have agency, and the communication from the people who own the place says, do your best here. We provide you the facilities and we want you to enjoy being here. This place is designed for you to enjoy being here. There must be a performance output from that, an increase in outcomes, which is invaluable.
Yeah, Dave, I think that's a really good point. I think there's been quite a bit of debate at some of the conferences I've been at about, that's all very subjective. I completely agree with it. I would have thought it's self-evident if you walk into a cathedral, for example, and it's flooded with natural light, you instantly feel good. And surely that would be exactly the same in a workplace, or, as I mentioned earlier, in your own house or in a school. If you feel good, then that's a great starting point to begin a learning journey, and yet I sort of often get the feeling that the government especially doesn't recognize that they need to see a demonstrable percentage improvement in attainment or something in order to justify spending extra money when clearly it's self-evident. It's self-evident that if you create a good environment, then people will respond really positively to that. I totally agree. We should get away from corridors and institutional stuff.
I can't help not believing that there's something fundamental in the process. There seems to be a frame of mind and a way of doing things that says you design the building and work out how big all the spaces are, where the corridors go, etc. And then at some point when that's all worked out, you then work out what goes on in the spaces, which, there's a lot of interior decoration goes on, just specify the carpet, paint the walls of color and pick a load of chairs to go in it. Whereas to me, when you in the commercial world, when you're designing an experience like a store, you start with what experience do you want that customer to have? What does it feel like? How do we get the outcomes that we want? And so you start there, and then once you've worked out how all this works together, you then house it. And it feels to me that this idea of creating the designing the kind of the human environment around the children is the start point. Whereas we tend to start with, and I'm not having anything against architects here, but we tend to start with the outside of the building and then work in. And I've got a funny feeling that actually, if we started inside the kind of heads of the children and the heads of the teachers and work outwards, then maybe that might bring about better experiences. And functionality has to be delivered, absolutely, but what else can go in there? Because as we were just previously saying, I'm not sure it's about inspiration. I think it's about where you're comfortable, where you like being. We tend to, I think, use the word inspiration because we see it as part of education, as of pedagogy, of the space itself can give more to the learning experience. But maybe actually, if we just concentrate on the kind of human requirements of, why do you love it when you walk in your house? Because it's comfy, familiar, I like being here, and I'm at home. And maybe that's where we need to think about the design of spaces, so that the kids would enjoy being there more. No, what you did. Maybe one more quick question, because I know we're actually out of time. But what do we think are the what type of space does inspire us? What kind of space inspires you guys as individuals? And is there a relationship maybe to what we're doing? Gareth?
Gareth, go and go. Yeah.
Oh, very quickly. The thing is, David, I like different types of spaces depending on what I'm doing. Sometimes I want smaller spaces so I can really concentrate. Other spaces I want to work collaboratively over a cup of coffee or a snack or whatever. So it's not just one size fits all, one space fits all. So that's why I think there has to be flexibility in schools. Kevin?
Yeah, I particularly love spaces that have strong connections between inside and out. And I think the idea of bringing the outside into buildings more often, I think, sounds great. Not only will it be great for well-being, and reducing CO2 and stuff, but actually it'll be yet another thing that helps to make a building feel good. I really liked, aspects of David's presentation in particular, where he was really giving that, that definitive sense of place, sense of ethos for that particular institution and that particular, vibe. I thought was great. And I think the trouble is that as architects, it would be great to do that for the exterior of the building as well as the interior. And quite often, creativity is limited because, certain restrictions are imposed. So in terms of, standard model types or whatever. So, yeah, I totally agree. I think inspiring spaces, interesting spaces, are a huge variety of different kinds of large scale, small scale, but all good buildings, whether they're a school or not, have a blend of lovely spaces that make humans feel good. That's ultimately what it's all about.
Yeah, I believe that the notion of, places that inspire me are actually are places that, I just love being. I like being there. It's not really about what I'm looking at in a kind of, in awe. As you mentioned before, churches and museums were all designed to make us look up to the skies and be awe-inspired. And I think, you can look at places that are designed to inspire us, like shop windows and things like that, where they're more like art galleries and you're looking at things. Whereas spaces that I actually find that I can think better are that's why I was so interested in Kathleen Riley's model, because, like a great cafe bar or the lobby of a hotel, where you're looked after and you're allowed to, they want you to stay. They want you to have a good time. They want to provide you with what you need. I can think, and my needs have been provided. It's like the first world problems in terms of Maslow's scale of needs. I agree, but I think those are the spaces, and I think that this idea of environments which are designed to look after our human needs, not just functions. I think there's a long way we can go, and there's almost something missing between architecture and interior decoration. There's a bit in the middle that seems to have been not appreciated, and I think that's something that we need to concentrate on. It's there in the real world. All the places we like to go to as adults are not purely designed for function first. Great restaurants, they're designed to be a brilliant experience. You watch, Gordon Ramsay's Kitchen Nightmares, and it's all about the whole experience. It's all about absolute consideration of what the customer, what's going to give them a great time. The music, the way the staff smile, everything that happens creates that great outcome. And I think that detail and much wider consideration set is something that we may need to consider to create much better environments in our schools. And I don't necessarily buy into the fact that is always a more expensive thing. There are lots of examples of places, yes, you can get very expensive stores, but, Lush is a very basic fit out, but one of the most sensorial stores in any mall. Great inspiring spaces don't have to be expensive. It's a lot easier when you've got more money, of course, but I don't think it's necessarily the case. So. Okay, well, I think we're out of time there. So I'm going to say thank you very much to Gareth and Kevin and for your time. And I'm sorry we've not got around to answering any of the questions in the chat directly, but we will do following up, I promise. So thank you very much from me.
Thank you. Goodbye from me. Apologies for the technical disaster my end earlier on.
No, and thanks from me. And sorry, I waffled on a bit as well.
No problem. Cheers now. Bye.
Fantastic. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.